Joining us, Punchbowl News co-founder and MS Now political contributor Jake Sherman, former Ohio governor and MS Now political analyst John Kasich, and chief economics commentator for the Wall Street Journal, Greg Ip. All right, so Jake, what's happening in Congress?
Well, on this topic, 6 Republicans, as you said, voted with Democrats to disagree with the president's tariffs on Canada. This is not the only resolution of this nature, Katie, that's going to come up, because the House voted just a few days ago, voted down a ban that would ban lawmakers from bringing these resolutions up to disagree with Trump's tariffs. And I think Democrats are going to, there's 2 ways this is going to go. Democrats are going to bring these up and most Republicans are going to vote against them. And Democrats are going to use that on the campaign trail and say Republicans are indifferent to the suffering and the high prices that Americans are facing every day. Or there are going to be some Republicans who vote against these tariffs and say, listen, I'm a Republican, I'm for President Trump, but I disagree with his tax and tariff regime, and I'm going to vote against him when it's necessary. And by the way, midterm elections tend to be about having a check on one-party power. That is helpful for Republicans, and the president did not like this. He effectively threatened to beat any Republican who votes against him on this topic. I don't know. I don't understand why, because even if these resolutions pass the House, pass the Senate, and get to the president's desk, the president could veto them. Congress would not be able to overturn that veto. So it's a cosmetic decision that the president's making. But it's important because this is going to clog up the House and Senate floor for the rest of the year, these kinds of resolutions.
They'll suffer the consequences, he said on social media. All right, Governor, this is what you always go back to. You say it's all about cost of living. It's all about the economy for the midterms. What do you think of Jake's analysis?
Well, I think it's pretty good. I would tell you it's kind of a jailbreak. You can see that the votes are starting to pile up. Now, it's not a great number, but they're starting to pile up because people in the Congress are worried about the issue of affordability. And frankly, tariffs, that's not a conservative point of view. Conservatism believes in open markets, free markets, balanced trade, and free trade. That's what they believe in. So, and for Trump to start attacking these folks who voted against him, he wants to keep the majority. How does he think he's going to keep the majority when he's attacking Republicans who make up part of the majority? And what he's going to do is going to turn his base off to those folks, which means they're more in danger. So, and look, I think, Katie, that poll is so amazing from YouGov about, people now saying Biden, they like him more than Trump. I mean, that's really pretty remarkable. But look, I think it's affordability, it's immigration, which is, by the way, hurting the economy, particularly in Florida, a lot of places. It's chaos. It's so many of these things that are happening. And frankly, people are just getting tired of it. And this election for the midterm is all about motivation. And I think the Democrats have the momentum now. And, it's like a prize fighter. They're pounding him up against the ropes. The question is, can they deliver a knockout punch by having any sort of an agenda other than we don't like Trump? And finally, I think the Democrats are going to win the House. I've been saying it now for a very long time, but I'm starting to believe that there is some issue about whether Republicans will keep the United States Senate. We see some of the same things going on over there, and that would be pretty remarkable. I'm not prepared to say anything there, but it's getting closer.
I'm going to get, Greg, I want to get you on tariffs in a second, but Jake, go back to that last part that the governor just put out there. You think the Senate's in play?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't think, I'm kind of with the governor on this, meaning it's way too early to say. But, I mean, there are a lot of seats that are in play. I mean, in the governor's home state of Ohio, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Sherry Brown could come back to Congress. Beating John Husted. I mean, would I put any money on that? I wouldn't. I mean, there's a lot of seats across the board, a state like New Hampshire, a state like Alaska. I mean, there are states that Democrats could win. I do think the odds today, as we sit here today, are that Republicans keep a narrow Senate majority, but I do certainly think it's in play, the Democrats could win the Senate. I mean, more today than perhaps in the past. But again, I'm still a little bit skeptical, as it sounds like the governor is as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing not to predict the future when it's 10 months away. 9 months. So, 9 or 10 months away. 9 months, thank you. Terrible at math. But it has been 10 months since the big tariff announcement, Liberation Day, from President Trump last year. And Greg, I want to get you on this. And here's a little bit of, we can put up some facts on the screen. 180 plus countries and territories are tariffed. The effective tariff rate, according to JP Morgan, is 15.8%, nearly 16. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that Americans pay 95% of tariffs. What have tariffs, Greg, done in your estimation to American sentiment on cost of living and how they feel like this is going for them?
Well, it's not so much about the magnitude, Katie. We don't think that the effect on the overall inflation rate is that large. It's really about the direction. I mean, people are worried about affordability. And even if you don't think the effect of tariffs is large, you can see where they're going, which is the wrong direction. And like Jake and Governor Kasich were saying, this is obviously playing poorly politically. And honestly, when you look at, I think, the anger with which Trump responded to the House vote against tariffs yesterday, he senses that his tariff push is kind of running out of steam. He's actually been rolling back tariffs fairly often on things like coffee and so on in response to affordability concerns. He's been making a lot of threats lately, but not carrying them out. He threatened 100% tariffs on Canada because they supposedly did a trade deal with China, which they did not. Those tariffs haven't materialized. He threatened 25% tariffs on anyone who did business with Iran. Those tariffs have not materialized. And by the way, he knows better than almost anybody that the Supreme Court is going to decide very soon whether the law he's used for most of those tariffs has actually been appropriately used. So it's not a stretch to think that a month or two from now, that the key tool behind his whole economic agenda will be taken away from him. And then what does he do? So I think that he, better than I think most people can see, but he can certainly see that most of the firepower left in the tariff gun has been exhausted.
What would be the wise move? Would it be to accept the Supreme Court rolling it back and doing away with these tariffs? Or would it be for him to use other powers, like a national security power, in order to impose those tariffs, Greg?
He's already told us, we know that they're working hard on finding backup authorities to use to impose a lot of these tariffs. But a lot of them are really, they're much more, they circumscribe him much more than these ones. They have, for example, deadlines. They can't be above, say, 15%. You can't impose them on every country. And so the other thing, by the way, is that you've got to look ahead, I think, to the second half of his term. If the Democrats really do control the House this fall, then that also puts a constraint on what he can do. And I wouldn't be shocked if you start to hear some people in the administration, maybe not Trump, but some people in the administration starting to reach out to Democratic voices, talking about, hey, maybe there are ways we can come up with a new sort of tariff system. It's not as extreme as what we have now, but one that you guys like if you want to win back the working class as well.
That's interesting, maybe a salvaging. Governor Kasich, what do you think of that possible projection?
Well, look, I think what could be critical, Katie, is if Hakeem Jeffries is the speaker, which I think is likely to happen, can he assemble a group of Democrats and Republicans that begin to seize back power from the executive? One of the big problems we have in this country, and it's been happening over a period of time, is that we've seen an imbalance. I mean, we have a very strong executive. The court, we still have to make a judgment on the court, but the legislative branch has been out to lunch. And the question is, could we, on a whole variety of issues, re-empower the legislative branch, the Congress of the United States, to get itself in a better position to balance off against the executive? To me, that's a critical issue for this country. And the question is if Hakeem Jeffries becomes the speaker, does he want to be speaker for the Democrats or does he want to be speaker for the Americans? And that's something that is very interesting.
Is that too pie in the sky for the reality of this Congress and this political moment?
No, it is not too pie in the sky, because you know why it isn't, Katie? Because deep inside the heart of many people, they really yearn to do well. And I'm just hoping that Jeffries will step back and look and see. He has to do the partisan things he has to do. But at the end of the day, There is an awful lot of good things that can be done on a bipartisan way, and I do not believe it's pie in the sky. It's the way it ought to be, and I'm not giving up on that thought. I'm sorry, I'm not, Katie.
Jake.